Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome for those joining us today. And thank you to Warren for co-hosting with me today. My name is Ellie Gescheit, your host today. Today we're going to be covering airspace, what stratas need to understand, what to do, what not to do, as well as I'm going to take you through the approval processes required. Just a couple housekeeping items to remember. Obviously, this is being recorded. For those that have registered for this webinar, we'll be sending you a YouTube link, some slides, as well as a summary of what Warren and I have spoken about. There is an opportunity to ask questions at the chat box at the bottom of your screen. You can ask both Warren and myself questions. We'll either respond to them when we can, or we're going to save some time, maybe about 10 minutes or so at the end to allocate for your questions and answers. And just to give a quick introduction to Warren, I hope you don't mind. I've written something up, but I don't want to miss anything. So please join me in welcoming Warren Livesey, founder of By Airspace, the Association of Rooftop and Airspace Development, and the Strata Council. You're obviously a busy guy, Warren. Warren's an airspace development specialist with nearly 3 decades of experience across London, New York, and Sydney. He's been a champion practical ways for strata owners to unlock unused rooftops for new homes and better shared spaces. And he's right at the forefront of this emerging housing solution in Australia. Warren, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Eli. Appreciate it. I will come through to my slides. See, hopefully you should be able to get them now. Great. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, airspace is a very exciting part, especially with the whole world suffering from densification issues as well as ultimately sharing space together. This project is the unseen asset or the hidden asset and unlocking the value through rooftop and airspace development. I've got about 12 slides. I'll read through them because there's a lot of detail, as well as just put a few extra comments of mine just at the end there as well. But it's ultimately tapping into the potential above our existing cities. And you'll see these little pretty blue boxes. They ultimately represent space above our existing buildings. Okay, so Australia, the urban challenge and how Upward Solution can provide more homes. So we got mainly three main problems and 2 solutions. Our main problems being the land scarcity. Land in our capital cities is defined, and the medium house prices still soaring as we see every day in the news. The housing crisis, of course, is persisting the shortage of impactful and affordable housing across Australia because we generally are quite flat and wide, opposed to condensing together in urban areas. And the urban sprawl, our cities are expanding outwards, putting immense pressure on our existing infrastructure. The opportunity, of course, is that our cities have this vast, untapped, unseen resource, the sky. We all agree that building up is the way to go. It's just that we're providing another option to the knockdown and rebuild. Airspace development allows us to build up, not out, creating value through our existing footprint and trying to save our buildings ultimately. So what is airspace and how can we use it in our day-to-day housing scenario? So the solution or the simple definition is the process of constructing new residential, commercial, or amenity space on top of our existing buildings. Rooftop development utilizes either a pitched roof or a flat roof, typically in an apartment, because that's where we focus. There's a lot of apartment
Warren, are you there? Seems like we've lost you. Sorry, everybody, just some technical difficulties. I think we've lost Warren. 1 second. Warren, we lost
Yes.
we
So
lost you for a bit.
yeah, have you got me in here now?
That's okay. Yeah, we can hear you and see you. Do you want to just continue
I'll
with it?
repair the slides and see where we got up to. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. Did we get up to this part? I think what is rooftop and airspace development?
Yeah, just make your screen a bit bigger, or if you know what I mean, just turn this into your presentation because we can see your screen.
Okay, let's go. So stop. It's always a way whenever you can.
Exactly. But we did do a trial run, but now good.
It's just the connecting
That's
sadly.
it. Yeah, keep going.
Okay, so I'm going to start here. Can you see this now? The what's rooftop and airspace development? Great. So the simple definition, it's the proceeds of constructing new residential and commercial space above our existing buildings. Rooftop development is ultimately utilizing that particular space above pitched or flat roofs, typically apartment blocks, because they're about 10 times the amount of those compared to commercial buildings. Of course, we can build above train stations, shopping complexes, any kind of shop fronts as well. But yeah, primarily looking at the apartment side. And the airspace rights, ultimately, it's a legal ownership of the vertical space above your property, which can be developed. So ultimately, where your building is built to where you're allowed to build up to, that's a particular airspace that can be sold or leased out to another person, and is effectively creating a new plot of land in the actual sky itself. Now, the key drivers for Australia and why this is becoming more and more important. So the economics, of course, the maximizing the asset value of a high growth market, capitalizing or creating prime real estate and achieving a high net return. So Australia is the most expensive place in the world, pretty much. So therefore, the airspace above our buildings is the most expensive in the world as well. Technology has moved really fast, of course, with lightweight materials and modular construction has been reducing a lot of the disruption. So a lot of the work is done off-site and then is craned onto site so that you're not obviously experiencing a huge noise conflicts and neighboring concerns. Regulations, yes, the state government and local councils are actively engaging urban infill and densification, as we know. So they're focusing on what we've got, not just on what we can build. And social and environmental. So gently adding housing in established suburbs and utilizing existing infrastructure, which is huge. A lot of the new builds, and a lot of the new policies, there may be 1 in 4 that may actually end up developing or knocking down and rebuilding, where we're focusing on the 3 out of 4 that won't be doing anything, but that would like to capitalize on their airspace above. Okay, so the benefits for the property owner and the strata schemes themselves is quite apparent, but ultimately there's a significant financial windfall. Of course, you're creating a new asset up in the airspace above a particular building, and that's generally captured by a joint venture agreement with a developer that can fund that as well as plan and build it on your behalf. The asset itself, so one's apartment, generally increases in value because obviously the building looks a lot better. It's obviously up to shape, and it's going to be a more of a conveniently located in the mainstream areas, as well as the building upgrades. There's generally little to zero costs for the owners themselves because they're capitalizing on the airspace. And of course, that amount of equity can help to overhaul the building, obviously add new roof, a new lift, maybe fix the concrete cancer, update fire safety, and eliminate those large special levies that a lot of strata owners are having to deal with at the present moment. Now, the benefits for our cities and our communities, of course, there's an increase of housing supply, delivering new houses in sought after areas around our established neighborhoods and character. We're estimating about 150,000 rooftop homes can be built just in Sydney alone, and close on 500,000 across Australia, just using our existing airspace above our 3+ story odd buildings. Sustainability, densification is huge. Of course, we're fighting against the urban sprawl, and obviously the reducing our car dependency, trying to get people within a close environment, especially our essential workers. In economic growth, of course, economy, it creates new jobs. It helps the councils to raise revenues. It's creating, better use of space, as well as the urban renewal. So we're upgrading our aging housing stock and making our suburbs more resilient and attractive. Because I think there's a huge focus on knockdown rebuild, which creates a huge concern for NIMBYs and people living in these environments, where there's a much more simple and gentle way of replacing their existing roof with new housing, which should certainly be supported more by government. All right, so the development process, the roadmap, first and foremost is identifying the opportunity. So the initial feasibility study and the financial, or should I say the structural planning for the building itself. If you were to throw a stone in it, you're looking at about $3,000 to $4,000 per square meter. So where a building may have 300 square meters of unused rooftop, times by 3,000 a square meter, you're looking at about a half, up to $1 million worth of asset that is not yet being used or utilized or seen. Of course, we find the space, we value it. The second point, deal with the actual constructural issues to ensure from a town planner, yes, there is airspace to be built into. A structural engineer can confirm that, yes, the building can take additional weight. And in some instances, in peaked roofs, we're taking off a majority, say on average 30 tons, and we're putting on 40 tons. So we're not loading the building quite significantly. We're only looking to add maybe 1 to 2 additional levels for that reason, lightweight levels. Yeah, so strata approval, third point, securing the vote, typically 75% in New South Wales, as well as Queensland. Victoria, in some instances, needs everyone to approve on that particular aspect, but I know they're looking at reducing that as well. Fourth point, the design and DA lodgement, lodging the development application to council. Of course, this is seen as an alts and adds. There's no additional legislation that is required. We're ultimately just adapting an existing building. Construction on site, establishment, reinforcement, and installation. So overseas, which airspace is very big. A lot of it is modular. It's done elsewhere and then craned on site. A lot of these buildings are requiring quite a lot of work to them while they're getting their plumbing, electrical, fire upgrades done. They actually replace the rooftop at the same time. So no one's actually having to extend the actual construction time. And last of all, the completion and handover. So finalizing new residents that's going to be up there and delivering the building plus the actual upgrades. And of course, a lot of developers are quite keen on this particular opportunity because they're not actually buying a whole site. They're just getting access to the roof itself, which helps with stamp duties as well as holding costs. So making airspace development close on 15 to 25% cheaper than traditional builds. All right, so is my building suitable? We very much focus on the older buildings, generally, of course, the structural integrity, post-war, double brick, they were built solid and can obviously be reinforced. But what we're looking at is trying to use the existing infrastructure and existing foundations. We're not hoping to change that by any means. Checking with local councils and town planners like Eli to ensure, what the height limits are allowed and what the setbacks and floor space ratios are in those particular areas will actually identify the opportunity. Now, I did say that pitched roof and flat roofs are quite common to be used. Of our flat roofs, we only have 5% of our strata buildings are actually have 50 units and above. So the majority of our 340,000 strata buildings in Australia are the smaller kind of 8 to 12 units, 3 to 4 story walk-ups with a 300 square meter roof that's not being used or utilized or will need to be replaced at some time, which is a key aspect of this. Of course, access the actual space for the construction, potentially putting in a new lift for everyone to access that particular space, as well as the existing first, second, third floor, say. We generally can put this into a redundant stairwell because you only need one, depending on height. But primarily, a lot of these older buildings have two, or you can have an external lift. And this really just allows existing owners to actually stay in their apartments for longer instead of having to possibly sell up and move because they can't handle the stairs anymore. So this is a great way of keeping our community together for longer. And then, yes, the strata schemes is the owners corporation, just ensuring that they are quite proactive in this approach. Okay, hopefully we're doing okay there, Eli. So navigating the challenges. So yeah, while the opportunity is immense and huge, there are some large hurdles to go over. So the strata approval of the 75% of the owners is obviously a sticking point. It's where owners do have quite a large capital works fund needed to be able to fix up their apartment, and they're looking for ways to fund that particular work without actually having to pay for it themselves or out of their own pocket. To give you an example, where you might need to find $1 million for the sinking fund, everyone's earning, say collectively 1.3, 1.4 million, and then getting taxed and putting that tax money into the sinking fund, where actually, if we can actually find the equity in the building itself, we saves that whole period. So yeah, so planning permission, it can be very complex. It's important to engage in council early and obviously take the advice of your town planners. They know what they're looking for, but I can say that councils are quite keen or are very keen on airspace because we're utilizing what we've got and it's an in-out process. It's pretty quick. Yes, last next point. So right to light and privacy. Of course, we need to think about our neighbors. That's why majority of the rooftop developments come in from the side. So we're not overshadowing. We're not taking away any of privacy issues. We're just utilizing the space that's there, especially the peaked roofs. There's nothing in there. Space that's just going underutilized and can be better used. And then, of course, the construction logistics. Yes, this is a live site, so difficult. We're really wanting everyone to stay living in this particular site for the period. Of course, if there's complex works where they're needing to do the fire upgrades as well as plumbing, electrical, and changing out windows, yes, everyone will need to move out, but they would be moving out anyway for a retrofit. And the next one, yes, so the future of airspace and where it will come to. So digital assets. So the advance of blockchain and smart contracts will, I see anyway, replace our analog system, which is very time consuming, as we all know how long it takes to actually purchase something and then, of course, get it agreed to by banks, where I believe our kids will have it all in a digital wallet, and they'll literally just sell 1/10 of their apartment to fund a holiday somewhere quite quickly. Yeah, so housing solution, we believe Airspace can create 500,000 new rooftop homes, replacing old rooftops. Green technology, of course, rooftops can be integrated with solar, which is perfect. Water harnessing and harvesting, using what we've got instead of sending it all down the stormwater drain. And urban farms, where overseas they actually are growing farms above, say, Woolworths and Coles, which is just a better utilization of space. Prop tech platforms are really well used. I know Archistar is a huge one that I do or use every day to try and find airspace, as well as policy evolution. So cities will create airspace development zones like they've done overseas, where they've actually allowed buildings to build up 1 to 2 additional levels with a provisional development rights, meaning they can do it as a CDC or compliant development, where these rooftop developments are not going through council. They're not getting pushed back by NIMBYs. They're literally just being built, which is obviously a step forward. Just to clarify, of course, our untapped asset, a rooftop development is smart, it's sustainable. We actually are keeping the building, it's not being knocked down and sent to the dump. We're putting on a carbon neutral rooftop home. And of course, we don't need to replace this building with a carbon intensive concrete block with defects that's been quite prevalent across Sydney anyway. So this is the sustainable way of doing it. It unlocks significant value for property owners that have an ignored or hidden or unseen asset. The proceeds, the funding can pay for upgrades to existing buildings, keeping them going for longer, and future-proofing them. Because as much as we need 1.2 million new homes, which is everybody hearing about, we don't hear about how we need to actually keep our existing stock for longer because we are going through a crisis. So we need to maintain them. And of course, by having the right team, the sky is literally the limit. Now, I'll pop this quick one in here as Eli had asked. These are a few rooftop developments that are happening here just in Bondi. To give an example, this one directly ahead of you is Bondi Road. It's an old building, 2-story, and they're adding an additional story up at the top. You can see the old photo there. The top right, that's actually Hall Street in Bondi. They're going up an additional level above an existing restaurant and commercial space. The next one in the middle, that's Hall Street as well. That's going up above a 3-story existing shop front, where they're adding a new level to the top to replenish the whole building. And then the one at the bottom is actually in Mosman. So that's going up one additional level above some shop tops. So these are just a few that are happening right now. And then first and foremost, and lately, just next steps. If anyone's interested in understanding more, get in touch with myself or Eli. We can tell you whether or not you do have any particular airspace can be done, and we can take it from there. All right, great. Thanks. All done.
Thanks, Warren. Very insightful as always.
Thank you.
There have been some questions that have come through. Feel free to answer them privately or maybe at the end. We'll allow for
Will
about 10
do.
minutes or so to answer those questions and any other questions that come through. Okay. I'll start up my slides for you guys. Remember, we'll be sharing the slides with you after this, probably in the next couple of days. An email will be sent out. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen now. Okay, so let's dive right into it. And I know a lot of people listening live and also who are going to be listening to it on the recording. I do appreciate everybody tuning in, especially during their lunch break. So it's almost a bit of a lunch and learn, these webinars. So yeah, again, appreciate your commitment to listening in. So my half of the presentation is going to cover really the nuts and bolts of the planning approval system, as well as taking through clients the pre-DA meeting and the value and opportunity of those meetings and those processes for this type of developments, especially when you've got multiple owners and stakeholders involved in the rooftop and attic conversion space. Low rental housing, what does that mean? People are going to be scratching their heads. Hang on, aren't we meant to be kind of adding value to the building? You're right, but at what consequence? I'll share a bit about that. And there's a couple of case studies two case studies that we were involved with over the years, as well as two others in the eastern suburbs. One of which Warren tells me he was involved with, which is great, and really some other considerations that you know either as consultants listening in or people that own their own apartments or sitting on the strata committees. I think this is going to add value to everybody listening in. And also, last but not least, who do you need in your team for such a proposal? And last but not least, Q&A. So just a shameless plug for Navon Planning. This is a slide, obviously, of what we do, all the services we provide. Currently, we have projects in around 20 councils at the moment of all shapes and sizes, going from car spaces in Bondi to childcare centres in Dapto and everything in between. This slide is quite important because we actually give this to all clients, and it kind of breaks down the lengthy and complex DA approval process for probably most projects or your typical project. And you can see on the top left is pre-DA meeting, and then in the middle is where you go in to prepare your DA, and then last but not least is once you've lodged the DA, what happens next. And in this particular context of apartment buildings and people wanting to add value to them through either attic conversions or a whole nother level, it's really important to have a pre-DA meeting, and I'll explain to you what that is in the next two slides. But most projects, I would say, don't need to have a pre-DA meeting. Like if you're building a new home, you don't need to go through this extra process. But I find it's much easier and more cost effective to have that extra step in terms of having a meeting with council to be able to flesh out any potential issues before you, I guess, invest more time and money in the project. Then moving along, after the pre-DA meeting, we start preparing the actual more documents and plans to submit the application, and then the third stage is really after lodging the DA, what happens next. So we don't really sit on our bums and do nothing. We're really on the phone to council or emailing them every 3 to 4 weeks to make sure that number one, they're doing their job in assessing your application, and number two, if there's any issues that pop up, we'll be there to respond to any issues or questions that may arise. And last but not least, hopefully you get an approval at the end of the lengthy process. So what is a pre-DA meeting? I could see some of the people in the Zoom or the webinar are architects and other consultants, so they're probably pretty familiar with what a pre-DA meeting is. But for those that don't know, a pre-DA meeting is kind of what it says. It's a meeting where you can talk to council about your proposal. So it's not a meeting that you just call them up and say, hey, can we meet? It's quite a formal process in that you need to submit documents to council, like a set of detailed plans, as well as a planning report and possibly other reports where necessary. But essentially, it's sort of like lodging a mini DA where you submit your documentation, and soon after that, you get to have a face-to-face meeting with council where you discuss what their issues are, and kind of working and finding a balance between kind of what council wants compared to what you want as a as a strata committee member or an owner of a unit or a developer or a consultant. And there's a lot of benefits, as you can see on this screen. So it's a lot more cost effective than lodging a DA. You might need 3 or 4 documents for a pre-DA meeting, so 3 or 4 consultants, compared to a DA where you might need half a dozen, maybe even up to 10 consultants. Obviously, the costs are way less than a full-blown DA. It's an opportunity to test the waters with council, kind of flush out any key issues. Obviously, when we're dealing with blocks of existing apartments, there's going to be some level of issues, whether it's privacy, overshadowing, or non-compliance with the controls. It's really a matter of trying to understand from council whether they're going to actually support it or not, ideally. You get written advice after the meeting, which is really great, because after reading the advice, you can say, okay, instead of going for 100 square meters of extra floor space upstairs, you're going to go in for 50 square meters. So you can kind of paint that story with council when you lodge a DA saying, we've listened to you, we've cut it down by 50% or whatever it is. And yeah, so that's why pre-DA is a really important process for this type of development. And obviously, because there's a number of owners in one building, obviously everyone is going to be super interested in understanding what council said, so that you've got written minutes from council. Just missed a slide. Yep. So there are obviously a lot of issues associated with pre-DA meetings, but I think the benefits outweigh the issues. You do need detailed plans. You can't just go up to council and submit, hand-drawn sketch. I tell people you probably have to prepare plans that are, I would say, 80% to the extent of a full DA, because if you give council more information and in terms of what you're proposing, then they can assess the application properly. Like if you just give them floor plans and no elevations, how are they going to know if you comply with the building height and things like that? There are often delays with scheduling a meeting with council, so it might be a month. I know with one particular council, it took, I think, almost 2 months to have the actual meeting. You need to wait for written advice too. Obviously, you can record your notes and things like that in your meeting with council, but it's really ultimately what their written advice says. At the meeting itself, I should mention, you're not going to meet all of council's, you're not always going to meet with all of council's staff. For example, the building might be in a heritage area and the heritage officer might not be available. But in saying that, once you receive your written response from council or written minutes, the heritage advice will be in those minutes too. Naturally, there's no commitment by council. They're not going to say, yep, we're going to approve it. It's great, because they can ultimately change their mind after the meeting. Plus, I would say, you most likely won't be submitting exactly the same plans as what you take to the pre-DA meeting. And the natural flow-on effect is that the council town planner who's looking at your pre-DA plans is the one ultimately that's going to be assessing your DA. It doesn't happen all the time, which also kind of is one of the issues associated with having a pre-DA meeting. So what is low rental housing? It comes under the housing SEP, so the state planning policy for housing, which is quite broad. There's a lot of different types of developments you can do under this policy. But the main factor relating to blocks of apartments is it's called the retention of low rental housing. What that means is basically, Warren probably has better statistics than me on this, but I would say maybe 95% of apartment buildings in Sydney are strata subdivided. So if your building is strata subdivided, none of this slide and what I'm going to say now affects you. It's only, I guess, to that 5% remaining of blocks of apartments that are not strated. Because what the intention of this policy is really around, if your building is not strated, then council is going to be looking at the rental records for the last 5 years of each unit in your block of apartments. as well as what's the rent, and does that line up with the median rent for your local council area? So for argument's sake, let's say in Randwick Council, the median rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is $500 a week. Okay, and in your block of apartments, there's some units going renting out for $400 a week. So obviously it's lower than that median, which in terms of the state government, that's considered as low rental. Now, this policy obviously only applies if you're strata subdividing your building or adding to it, like a roof space. But the byproduct of the DA and hopefully council approving your development is that it's going to increase the value of the building and also the individual units. So to kind of if your unit or in your building, there's units there that are considered low rental, then there's a contribution that the building or the owners have to make to council in lieu of improving the value of those units. Again, this is only when the building is not strata subdivided. So there is a calculation involved, and you need rental history for the last 5 years of all the units in the building. But you can come across contributions of 400 grand. We've worked with a project. It was a boarding house, obviously different to your typical block of apartments, and I think the contributions were that they would have to pay would be, I think, 700 grand. Naturally, the client didn't go with the project in the end for a number of reasons. But it's really important that if your building is not strata subdivided, that you go through this exercise, because it can have a serious impact on your budget for the project. So I'm going to share with you 2 case studies for projects that we were involved with. The first being in Tamarama, so in Waverley Council. So the client bought an old block of apartments, as you can see here, and all they wanted to do was really improve the apartments. The building wasn't strata subdivided, but they really wanted to improve with balconies and other additions, including rooftop attic space there. Now, interestingly, the previous owner had approval from the council many years ago for attic, which had since lapsed. So we were proposing something very similar because of obviously the planning controls had changed and the council's general policies around developments of this nature. They didn't permit the same size attic, so we had to reduce it quite substantially. So in the top is obviously the photomontage, which was ultimately what was approved. In the bottom of your screen was actually we had to prepare a view assessment because this was taken actually from my drone over someone's balcony to kind of demonstrate view impacts, and council was pretty concerned about view impacts, so we did have to adjust the size of these dormer windows, these side bits of what you can see here, to make sure that there wouldn't be any view impacts. This is kind of what was approved essentially. So each of the units had got approval for a bedroom upstairs and a bathroom. The original proposal was a lot bigger, and also for a balcony, I believe, but this design didn't include a balcony at the back. In the bottom right, you can see also just a roof plan, also how the roof profile was changing, and this was a section. So each of the units at the back received balconies. There was even an approval for a garden apartment downstairs, which was quite cool. I think it was a laundry or something previously, so they were able to get another unit out of the whole development. And that was, project in Tamarama. This is actually a current project we've got in a block of apartments in Randwick Council. We haven't made it yet to the DA stage, but we did have a pre-DA meeting with council a couple of weeks ago. And what we decided, so essentially the clients owned the 2 top units, consolidating them into one, and wants to go into the roof space. So what we did was we actually went into the pre-DA meeting with options for council to kind of choose from. So we went with this option where you can see the roof pitch and the attic is kind of embedded within the roof to kind of have a little balcony facing the street. and also a rumpus room. That was kind of the basis for the application. And then we presented them this other option where you've got also a rumpus room, but balconies along the sides. So again, trying to retain that the existing roof as much as possible, rather than like a whole nother level. And inevitably, council was pretty supportive, I would say, of one option over the other. Both of the options kind of carried their different risks and impacts. But I thought it was I think the client found it to be a beneficial process for them also, because we actually showed council two options rather than just saying, here's one, what do you like, what don't you like? So ultimately, yeah, the next step is really for the client to take the plunge and to lodge the DA. Hopefully, one of these options, or maybe a hybrid, will get approved. Here's a project that we weren't involved with, but some of you might be familiar with it. It's actually designed by Luigi Roselli, local architect. And what it was, I don't actually have any other photos to show you, but it was of one of these like two-story Art Deco block of apartments. And council allowed, I would say maybe at least 10 years ago, maybe more, allowed this additional level with kind of an attic on the top. That's that white sliver you can see on the top right. So they were actually able to achieve quite a lot on this block of land. And I find it to be quite an interesting design, especially because it's on the corner. I think it has 3 street frontages. So it's something that was really was a great outcome, I think, and a sensitive design to this old Art Deco building. The next 2 slides is also a project we weren't involved with, but Warren tells me he was involved with it. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's quite I don't remember what it's called, but the building is now called Skye, Skye, where a bunch of owners, I believe about 76 owners of the building, needed to do, I think, almost $40 million worth of work, remediation work in the building with concrete cans and other stuff. And what they decided to do was, let's get approval for 2 penthouse apartments on top and sell each of them for 20 million, and they'll make their money back. Great idea, very clever, but they were up against a lot of hurdles. I believe it also had to go through the Land Environment Court. But ultimately, it was an outcome that produced, this 2 penthouses overlooking Tamarama Beach. And also in the top left, you can see this is one of the floor plans of the apartments. I don't know how much they were actually sold for. Maybe Warren knows more. But ultimately, the idea is there. It's just the process in which to reach this point, I don't believe was smooth sailing. But I guess that's ultimately the game of building up and buying airspace above all, existing buildings, that it's not straightforward. And I think Warren alluded to it before, that if you were in the position to knock down the apartment building and rebuild, number one, obviously, but besides the expense of it, it's you might actually produce a building that's even bigger and bulkier than what's there at the moment. So there's certainly benefits in adding on to existing buildings. So here are a couple more considerations on top of what I've already said. So when you're dealing with a block of apartments that's strata subdivided, each unit is entitled to their own lot, their own unit, their own car space. When you apply to council for a DA, you actually have to remember to apply to amend the strata subdivision plan. In other words, the units are a bit bigger, they have a balcony or whatever it is. So you have to remember that level of detail on your plans. Otherwise, it might be approved on paper, but the strata plan also has to be updated. It's something that I think is often missed with such projects. Dealing with older buildings, there's some Building Code of Australia, NCC issues like fire egress, lifts, stairwells. All those things they kind of come into play also when you're modifying or refurbishing the building. Another thing too, I think Warren said this before, that while some units will benefit from this extra roof space, let's say the upstairs units, how are the other units going to benefit from also? So we find adding balconies to those units. We've had before like a laundry at the back or underneath the building has been one of the units has extended out and taken over that laundry space. So all the other units get their own internal laundry facilities. So there's got to be obviously a negotiation there between the owners, but it's something that definitely that's part of the overall process. And last but not least, you need to make sure that what you're building on top is going to actually withstand the building is going to existing building is going to withstand the extra load on top of the building. So some of the key players you'll need for your team, kind of split it up into the pre-DA as well as the DA stage. So in terms of the consultants, surveyor, architect, building designer, urban planner, obviously, and probably a BCA consultant. It's important to note, since the changes to for architects and building designers, they need to be registered to be able to design and get involved with a block of apartments and a roof addition. There are some building designers, well, they might have the qualifications and experience, but they're not registered to be involved with a block of apartments. I think it's at least it's got to be anything above 3 levels. It might switch over to a registered architect. So you need to be clear on which consultant you're going to be using for that. And then naturally with the DA stage, you're going to need a lot more consultants. And I've listed a couple there. There could be more. Like as I said before, the project we've got in Randwick Council is in the heritage area, so we have to get a heritage consultant to assist with that. But just some final comments before I hand it over to Q&A. So most older apartment buildings don't comply with the current regulations. You have even some apartment buildings sitting on R2 zone properties, which you can only really have a house, but there's a block of apartments there. So there are some inconsistencies there to work out. And the kind of the way to overcome these non-compliances is through working carefully with your team on a design that doesn't impact the area as much as possible. Again, to try keep it contained within the roof as much as possible. If your building has a flat roof, then obviously you can't really conceal the attic, and it is a bit more challenging. Just like that example I showed you in Tamarama. Pre-DA meeting is definitely the way to go for all of these types of projects. It's a lot more cost effective, and purely because you might, as unit owners in the building, you might come to the point where it's going to cost this much. Council has already said no. Let's stop here. Or that's the beauty of a pre-DA meeting. Rather than lodging a full DA, it might cost 50, 100 grand just to lodge a DA. With all the consultants needed. Only after that process, 6 months, 12 months later, you realize, oh, it's going to get refused anyway. So better to get the advice up front. And obviously you need a budget accordingly to cover off all expenses. Warren and I were talking before we started the webinar. You even might need to consider our land environment court costs, depending on how strong you want to push your project. And last but not least, it's better to get advice from experts early on. I'll just share quickly, another shameless plug for our next webinars. So we had one lined up, I think, in 2 weeks' time with Melissa Neighbour, but unfortunately she's had to cancel. So we're going to reschedule that. But the next one is in October. I've lined up David Chandler, which is going to be an exciting webinar on kind of breaking the barriers between the approval process and the construction process. What happens in the middle. I thought it'd be a great opportunity to get David on board for that. And also going to talk, again, we've got another couple more months till the end of the year. So I want to be lining up these other people too, also heritage, talking about heritage and also project management with Kat. Okay, I will open it up for the questions and answers now. Okay, Warren, are there any questions there that you want to read out or answer them? Warren, are you there? I think we've lost you again. Warren, maybe just rejoin. While you do that, there's been some questions that Warren's already answered, which is great. So for those that don't know, I don't think you can see Warren's responses, but for people that haven't asked the question. But Cheryl, nice to see you. It's been a while. Cheryl's asked a question. How much did that cost to build and what was the added value uplift? Not sure which project you're talking about. Maybe one of the ones I spoke about. But obviously, yeah, you need to factor in the cost of the whole development exercise, negotiating with the neighbours, getting lawyers involved, strata managers, all these people involved, as well as ultimately what you think the product, you can sell the product at later on.
Sorry, I'm back.
Yeah, Warren, we can hear you and see you. Thank you. Cheryl, you also asked who is the builder. Again, I'm not sure which project you're referring to.
Tamarama was Buildcorp.
Buildcorp. Okay. Do you know how much it cost, Warren, to build that?
Gazillions. Gazillions of dollars. But they did dig down into the ground and create parking for everybody. Everyone got a balcony. And of course, the average one bedder went from 600,000 to 1.2 million in resale. But I will point out just quickly on this one point we had spoken about, I certainly do not recommend at all that Strata do it themselves. I do suggest the international model is to do a joint venture with a developer, someone that has the experience, the money, and the know-how of how to actually unlock this airspace. Tamarama took about 12 years and went over budget on many times because of it being in this individual process and trying to there was 14 times they had to get 75% of the owners on board, where if you actually tender out the airspace to developers, you only have to vote once for a call option contract, and speediates the process up between 18 to 24 months.
There you go.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what they're doing overseas. To give you an example, 180,000 airspace homes in London, 140,000 in Paris, New York, Boston. It's just slow in coming to Australia, but now I think we're starting to look at it more intently.
Thanks, Warren. Someone's asked here, Tamika Sherwin. Thanks for, I don't know if you can see the questions there, Warren. She's asked, hi, thank you for this information. As it appears you're in New South Wales, do you have connections in Queensland? Warren?
Yes, we have a number of projects actually in Queensland and Gold Coast. So yes, we do.
There you go. Another person, Ryan Theodore, thanks for listening in. He's asked, well, it's not really a question, it's a comment. He said, I'll read it out. Great webinar, guys. Thanks for taking the time to assemble the info and sharing your insights and experience. Very grateful. Greetings from Qatar.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You're right.
Get in there.
I don't think they have a problem with the airspace in Qatar.
Yeah, they got a lot.
Patrick McNamee, he's asked, how does a certifier apply current NCC/BCA requirements overlaid against old non-compliant buildings? Patrick, that's the million-dollar question, because ultimately an old building cannot physically comply with the current standards. So there's going to be a bit of a balancing act in terms of doing the owners, I guess, doing what they can to bring the building up to speed, as well as kind of the certifier and the BCA consultant and any other consultants like structural engineers and fire consultants are the ones that are going to have to be arguing your case that it doesn't comply.
Yeah.
Warren, there's a question probably here for you from Anonymous. They've asked, who generally pays for the new strata plan? body corporate or developer, or shared costs?
It's generally a shared cost. So ultimately, the owners aren't expected to pay anything. We tender out the airspace to a developer. The developer takes it from there. They plan it. They plan it. They fund it. They build it, and they split the proceeds 50-50. So yes, everything is covered by the developer, but yet everything is split 50-50. So it's to create a harmonious relationship between the owners and the developer. And the owners don't ever relinquish ownership of the airspace. I think it's important to say. They give the developer access to their rooftop. The developer can come along and obviously build, plan, and sell. It's only once it is sold to the new rooftop person does the actual title transfer over. So the reason for that is so that if anything was to happen to the developer in the meantime, the owners always continue to have ownership of that particular space.
Okay, thank you. There's another question here. Warren, you might be able to answer it. I don't know. They've said from Ali Rizwan, he's asked, are there any recent DAs in Woollahra or Waverley which seek stratum subdivision or airspace development based on the recent LMR reforms?
Not LMR. To be honest, there's a number. LMR, for those that don't know, it's any building within 800 meters of 171 business areas around New South Wales. It affects about 20,000 strata blocks that can all add 1 to 2 additional levels to their existing. So if you're 800 meters out, you can go up to 4 stories. If you within 400 meters, you can go up to 6 stories or up to 8 if you're doing. But yeah, it's still, we've got 7 applications or pre-DAs in the mix in regards to them, but no one yet has kind of pulled the trigger on them.
I think, yeah, I think the LMR is more geared towards a new build rather than adding on to existing apartment buildings, mainly because, as I said a couple of times already, existing buildings don't comply, not just with the council planning controls, but also the building regulations like stairwells, lifts, and fire, all those bits and pieces. So I think they're really designed for new builds. I have seen, though, recently in Rose Bay, a block of building being proposed, which already had approval for 3 levels, and now they're seeking approval for 6 stories on the back of the LMR. Danny Curry has asked, Warren, this is probably for you also. Are you able to transfer or sell the roof space to another site?
Heritage airspace, yes, in the city of Sydney, but not any other council that I'm aware of. And that's the airspace above a heritage listing, where they can
Yep.
sell the airspace for approximately $2,000 a square meter and apply that to another development within that same council area. But we are very much advocating for this to be across the board, that we can fund all heritage buildings by selling their particular airspace.
Yeah, good question. I wonder why other councils haven't adopted that policy yet. Maybe they will in time with your help, Warren.
They haven't been asked. Yeah, yeah.
It's quite a clever system, what City of
Oh,
Sydney.
it's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of
These
conditions with
heritage
that.
buildings, they can't build up. They can't use their airspace.
Yeah.
Yeah, council have stopped them basically, but at least they can use the funding to fix up and repair, which is ultimately what we're wanting to do with all these aging apartment buildings too. But just on your point, Eli, I'm finding a lot of interest in LMR for going up, adding an additional level, because 3-story building can go up to 4. It's not financially viable for them to knock down and rebuild up to 4. Adding the 1 additional level on top is a preferable option. But yeah, it's the funding of that we're all still in the pre option of that.
Okay. Still a couple more questions that are coming through. Brent Rosendale, nice to see you. He's asked, again, it's probably for you, Warren, do you need 75% of strata agreement by entitlement or owners?
By entitlement, by unit entitlement. So ultimately, it's basically you can't have more than 25% against it, opposed to 75% forward. But yes, it's based on unit entitlement. So if an owner has a garage or a laundry and they might be slightly larger unit entitlement, well then they can add that. But primarily what they do in attic conversions, you add an additional lot to the existing strata block. So if it was 10, it goes to 11. But what we're primarily doing with rooftop and airspace development, we're creating a stratum, which is another titled, which is just the title above the rooftop itself. So the existing owners, they keep their unit entitlements as set, and then we have this new legal entity on the top.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, it sounds like you know what you're doing, Warren. A lot of hoops you've got to jump through. Um, Someone has asked, anonymous, what are the common mistakes that can get a DA delayed or rejected? There's many. I think just the most simple mistake is not getting proper advice upfront by professionals. And I'm not saying just town planners, talking about even the level of detail like structural engineer. You might be able to get a beautiful roof extension approved through council and then realize, oh, we can't build it because the building is not structurally sound or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of common mistakes, but I would say just getting advice up front. And then the last one from Michelle Washington. There could be some others coming through also, but I'll just read out this last one. She's asked, with a policy shift towards lower parking standards and maximums rather than minimums in areas with good public transport, the council's being reasonable about requiring additional parking. Warren, what's your
Yeah, look, so parking is not as big of an issue as it used to be. We are obviously looking at what sites and what we can use of existing that's there for parking, as well as getting buildings to sign up for car share programs, ensuring they are on a public road. Obviously, a huge opportunity for rooftop is all these shop tops that are already buildings that are already on the main road that don't actually, potentially will then require the parking. Of course, then the apartment block. So we need to, each individual situation needs to be confirmed and generally explained in the SEE report and the Statement of Environmental Effects.
Yeah, it's a good
Council are not holding us to it as they used to.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that. And another point to Michelle, just to bear in mind, often in older apartment buildings, you don't have enough parking for everybody. And sometimes you see car spaces being used for other bits and pieces. It's kind of shared and it's been used like that for many years. One of the things to bear in mind is if you're lodging a DA or even a pre-DA on your building, you have to get parking formalized. For example, you need technically, I think, probably a car space that's for disabled parking, for example. Like, most old buildings, you can't fit that. So, yeah, even though strata arrangements are quite informal in terms of who parks here, who parks there, that maybe the car space has traditionally been used for garbage bins or whatever. When you lodge a DA or a pre-DA to council, that all has to kind of be tidied up.
Formulated, yeah.
I don't believe there's any other questions. But otherwise, yeah, thanks, Warren. That was very insightful to me also. It's always good to learn new
Well,
things.
there's a lot. There's a lot of definitely opportunity. We very much are advocating to government. We believe that airspace development is required. There's a huge focus on knockdown and rebuild. And we just saying, well, hey, it's not the most sustainable. How about we keep what we've got and let's build up above it? And that's what's basically happening overseas, is that most people don't want to leave their home. They've already bought their apartment. They love the corner shop and the post office and the likes, but they're not able to capitalize on this. So what we're saying is just let's build up above the example and let's try and save as much as we can.
Sounds good. Thanks, Warren. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. See you.